Sanam, yogis and yoginis, hello, welcome. Welcome back to the Yoga Sutras. We're going to carry on today, starting from where we left off the last day. So we will continue with Sutra 1.29 today. 1.30. 1.29 was the last video. We will do 10 sutras today, and we will cover the obstacles and what can we do to overcome the obstacles in our practice towards getting to samadhi. So we have a few more videos before this, for the end of this book, and then we will kind of collect all the ideas. But basically, we have already talked a little bit about these chittavrittis, these movements, these waves, and how the waves can be of different kinds, and some of them we suffer because of them, and some of the particularities about that, some things about them, about why do we suffer from those things. Now today we're going to go a bit more in depth into these obstacles, and we start with 1.30. Let's start right away. Let's go. We will be reading mostly from this text now because it's easier to get the whole information than if we read in the book. It may be too much detail. From the book it might be too much to go into every word and the etymology. I really like to do that, to look at the etymology of every word, and see something like, I don't know, pramada, where does it come from? Well, price forward, mada is intoxicated, but what does that mean? That negligence or carelessness, forward intoxicated, how is that connected? And so trying to understand the roots of the words are sometimes very useful, but sometimes it can be too much in depth, and we're not going to go so much in depth. We said that we would go a bit faster now with the following sutras until we get to the actual practice of the part 2, the second part of the book. So we will read from here. And 1.30, 9 kinds of distractions come. There are obstacles naturally encountered on the path, and they are physical illness, that will be the vyadi, tendency of the mind to not work efficiently, that's, sorry, hold on a second, that's the sthana, so you can see the vyadi here, the sthana here, you can follow. These are every one of the 9 different obstacles that Patanjali talks about. Disease or illness is mainly about the physical body, so the first one is referring mostly about the physical. When it comes into sthana, is about the mind. And these 9 things, by the way, I've seen some texts that describe how actually the 9 come in order, and one leads you to the next. So, for example, having some sort of disease in the body, that's going to cause some sort of inefficiency or dullness of the mind. Yeah, so vyadi leads on to sthana. Even though, I can see some of the connections between them, but I think it's trying to, it's a little bit difficult to make the connection for all of them. And I don't think we even need to make that connection. I think we can just take them as 9 different categories that Patanjali identifies as obstacles. I don't even think that this list is complete, but it's an interesting starting point from Patanjali. So let's talk about it. Yeah, disease, that is mainly on the physical body. Then there's sthana as the mental laziness or idleness or dullness of the mind. Samshaya, that's doubting and indecision. And sometimes we speak in this channel how about doubts and indecision is often said that is the most difficult obstacle in the path of the woman in her spiritual path. That's one of the challenges. That is the strongest challenges for the woman particularly. But of course, everybody struggles with doubts and indecision. Pramada, that is negligence or carelessness. Alasya, that is also laziness, but this is more physical. Even if we found the sthana, which is the mental aspect, so alasya would be stupor or sloth or just not having enough energy to do things, so you feel it in your physical body. Then avirati, that is craving. And it can be craving for stimulus from the senses. It could be sexuality, but not just sexuality, it's sensuality. So it's the senses and how much we get attached to the stimulus of our senses. So also looking, like for example, being very attached to social media, for example, or screens, let's say, a more general one. Then we get attached to the stimulus that we receive through the eyes, of this. The screen is stimulating us through that. So that is the avirati. And then Bhranti Darshana and Alabdha Bhumi Katva. This is like, the first one, Bhranti Darshana. Darshan is to see, to perceive, to see something. And Bhranti is just false. So a false perception. Now, a false perception, we know it comes because of the experiences that we had from before and also our karmas. So whatever we have experienced is going to set up a filter into how we perceive the world. We talked in these Yoga Sutras before about colored thoughts with some coloring, and how that gets recorded in our memory, and then also the next time that we see something, we are colored by that experience. So that is going to be one of the obstacles to having, the obstacle to what? Well, to having a still mind, a quiet mind, a peaceful mind to meditate. So having colored thoughts in the sense of perception, so a disturbed perception is going to be a challenge to be calm in our minds. It's quite obvious, yeah. And then the other two that are coming together is Alabdha Bhumikatva and Anavastitadva. And that is failing to attain a certain stage in your practice and coming down from that stage, slipping down from the stage. So it could be like you are set at yourself a certain objective in your practice, and it's challenging to keep up with the objective that you had set up for yourself to do. And so not being able to reach that, and that's one, but also even if you reach it, how quickly you fall from it. So sometimes we set up certain this is not exactly the same, but it can serve as an example. We set up a commitment, and I'm going to do this every morning, 10 minutes of meditation every morning, and then you do it for 3 days in a row, and then how quickly you slip out of the habit. That's because it didn't become a habit. Yeah, we did it 3 times. It didn't become a full habit. But also how difficult it is to create that habit. That would be like how difficult to get to that level. Well, this is an example on terms of commitment, but you can put this example as well in terms of your practice on how you see the world. So for example, if I commit myself to seeing people in a neutral light, and then when they speak, not to assume anything, so that's my commitment, and then how difficult is it for me to get there? So people are speaking and I'm assuming things, and then I have to remind myself, don't assume anything, and then you are constantly having to check yourself. So to get to that level of neutrality, let's say, it takes a lot of effort and time and commitment and all these things that we have been talking about already in the sutras, like the intensity with which you practice and so on. And even if you get there, there's a certain moment when you can find a certain level of neutrality in your perception of the intentions of people. Let's say that you are neutralizing and you are not assuming anything. You get there, and then how quickly we fall from there. So those are the two aspects that Patanjali tells us in these two terms. Then Chitta Vikshepa, that's the distractions of the mind, the distracted mind. And actually, here Patanjali puts it in number 9, but that's probably maybe the first for us in the Western society, and particularly nowadays, today, with the social media being everywhere. And I was just talking to my daughters about this yesterday, how if you look at some cartoons on TV, you will see that maybe the camera is focusing on one child, and then the child is speaking to another, and then the camera switches to the other child, and then the camera is switched to focus on a toy, and then it comes back to the second child and then the first child. And you can count how many seconds does it stay the camera on one frame, just stable camera. And in some instances of some cartoons, you can find that they go so quickly from one to another. It's like 1 second, 1.5 seconds, something like that. And that's a very, very bad sign. That's a sign that to try to keep the attention of the baby or child, they are stimulating, because every frame, every new frame is a new stimulation. So, and the eyes, remember, is 70% of the energy that enters into the brain through the senses goes through the eyes. So it captures your attention, 70% of your attention, and that is like a hypnosis. So I know that some cartoons are designed to capture the attention of the babies or the child and not let it go. And they are very efficient in doing that. But what it happens is that it creates in the child, in the very young brain, this expectation of changing. And then when there is something that is stable, then the child cannot get focused on that because it's used to change. So that makes it the brain very distracted. And very modern diseases like ADD, attention deficit disorder, very easily gets enhanced by this need to constantly be changing the attention to what you're looking for. So just to focus attention on something, it gets lost. So a typical problem will be that the parents don't have time enough or energy enough to deal with the baby. And when they are with the baby, they rather put a screen in front of the baby. And then there are some programs even in YouTube, you can find like these Cocomelon videos, which are very low quality lyrics, a tune that works, that it captures the attention of the baby, but then it's not a high quality music, and it's always repeating the same. There's no story to follow. There's just these bright colors, bright sounds, repeating sounds, and it change. Now the baby is very still and completely hypnotized by the TV, and the parent is happy because they don't have to deal with a crying baby, but it's going to have some consequences and secondary effects. Now, what will later become things like attention deficit disorder, I would say that's also in the very beginning. I would call it ADD in terms of attention deficit disorder. That is the baby receiving attention from the parents. And if the baby is not receiving attention, so he's deficit from attention, he goes for something else that is trying to capture his or her attention. So that's the tablet or the screen of the movie, of the TV or something. So that ADD of lack of attention from the parents becomes lack of attention of the baby when he needs to focus on something else. And then you will see that when it's in front of the screen is very calm, when it's out of the screen is very disturbed and distracted. So, and because that creates an effect that is like increasing every time it's worse, it's like an addiction in some ways, then the parents start to have problems with feeding. So they have to put the screen in front of the child in order to feed the child. And look, I'm not trying to judge the parents. Okay, this is not a judgment on the parents. This is just to say actions have consequences. And we take a very, very young, malleable brain, and if this is the way you stimulate it, this is what you are going to cause. So imagine 2,000 years ago, Patanjali was telling us the 9th obstacle is this distraction. And now it's become an epidemic. Yeah, and you see very young people who are just unable to focus to study, and they may want to study, they may even be interested in the topic, and yet their mind is unable to focus on one thing. And this is partly triggered with all these things that are trying to capture our attention. It has always been like this. Maya has always existed. There's always been things trying to capture our attention, but that is so much more increased right now. So interesting that Patanjali would identify it back then. So these are the 9 obstacles. Remember, disease in the body, disease in the mind. There is the failure to achieve a certain level, falling out of that level very quickly, and then the distracted mind, the mind that is distracted. What else was there? The laziness, in the mind and in the body, and craving for the senses, carelessness and doubt. Carelessness, again, carelessness comes from not being careful. When are you careful? When you have the capacity to pay attention to something for a prolonged period of time, so that you are careful of what you're doing. If your mind is distracted, then there is carelessness, and there is kind of like a lazy attitude. So you can see how it connects also to the laziness. So as I mentioned, they are connected, but they are not necessarily one as a consequence of another. We can see them independently, but we can also see the connection between them. Well, that's quite nasty, this list of 9 things. And I even mentioned it's probably not complete. There's so many more things that we can imagine that are disturbing our mind, but it's a good start. And so it's a good start to focus on thinking about these things. In which ways am I lazy? In which ways am I not healthy enough about my body or my mind, and so on. And Patanjali goes on the 1.31, and he says, well, these 9 obstacles are going to manifest in some particular way. And that's the 1.31. He says they are going to be, from these obstacles, there's going to be a number of consequences, actually 4 of them. So from these obstacles, there are 4 consequences that also arise. And these are mental or physical pain, sadness or dejection, restlessness, anxiety, and irregularities in the breath. Okay, so let's go slowly through this. There is quite a lot in this sutra I would like to unpack. Some of the sutras we will go softer and we will just go more on the surface, but this one I would like to go a bit deeper, because these are the consequences of the 9 obstacles, or let's say the symptoms. Now, dukkha is not just pain. Dukkha is suffering. It can be pain like mental or physical, like it says here. But remember when I was at the very, very beginning of the Yoga Sutras of this course, we talked about pain and suffering and the difference between both, and how, depending on our attitude, we can go through pain without suffering necessarily. And some things are pleasurable, but we suffer through them, with them. So pain and pleasure, they are triggers of this mechanism of survival within us, which is very necessary, has been necessary for us to evolve into human beings as what we are right now. But the kind of life that we lead right now, which is rarely we are exposed to extreme situations of stress, like facing a wild animal that is going to attack you. We rarely, if ever in our life, experience this, mostly. And yet, the same mechanism of this survival triggers when we go through a situation that the brain thinks that we have to go into survival mode. That's mainly through stress. So that mechanism that was for survival and the triggering of the pleasure and the pain that was helping to trigger that mechanism, that gets hijacked by this stress that is secondary, that is mental, and then we suffer because of that. So pain and pleasure do not correspond anymore to something that is evil, and pleasure something that is wonderful, but there's going to be a distortion in this. And here Patanjali tells us, when he uses the word dukkha for this pain, dukkha, he's referring to suffering. And suffering, the word dukkha is a very interesting word. I find quite a bit on this. There is dukkha and there is sukha. There is both sides of it. And dukkha being suffering, sukha would be like being content. It could even be happy. And it can also be pleasure. It can also be pleasure in a, let's say, in the negative way that I'm just saying right now. Like pleasure could be leading to suffering as well. So we have to be careful how this word is utilized. But I will read this line from Guru Nanak. And he says, Dukkha daru sukha roko bhaya, ja sukh to amana hoy. It's actually a very beautiful Shabbat. I wish I could put some music, but I'm not certain about the copyright of the music. But I invite you to find in YouTube the Shabbat, and there's some kirtan playing this music. Duk daru sukha orogo beya ja sukha ta amna hoy. And what the meaning is, duk daru, so the suffering is the medicine, the pain is the medicine, and the pleasure is the disease. Sometimes I've quoted this line like the pain is the medicine and the pleasure is the poison, something like that. I may have quoted it not exactly 100% in the past, but I was looking today for the right quote. So the suffering is the medicine and the pleasure is the disease. Now, funnily enough, here Guru Nanak utilizes the words the other way around, saying dukkha is necessary and sukha, meaning in this context pleasure, that could be the disease. And he says, because when there is pleasure, ja sukha tam na hoy, when there is pleasure, there is no desire for God. So these words from Guru Nanak are reflecting this concept of dukkha and sukha, but in another way, meaning pleasure and pain. But often when we are talking about dukkha as suffering and sukha as contentment, that would be dukkha now is the karma and sukha is the dharma, let's say. And there is a mantra that we chant in the mornings in Kundalini Yoga. That's Rakke Rakke Nahare. I chant it with my daughters in the car, and I chant one line, and then one of them chants one line, and the other one chants another line. Then I chant the fourth, fifth, sixth, and we chant like this, the Shabbat, the mantra, and is I'll chant it like that. Rakke Rakke Nahare Apavariana Gurki Peripae Kaj Savariana O Apade Alamano Navisariana Sadhajanaka Sangha Baba Jalatariana Sakataninda Kadushtakina Mai Vidariana Tis Sahaba Kita Nanak Manamai Tis Simmarat Sukha Hoe Sagala Dukku Jai Tis Simmarat Sukha Hoe Sagala Dukku Jai. So this is Simmarat Sukha Hoe Sagala Dukku Jai. Simmarat is that's repeating, that's meditating on the name of God, that's vibrating within this memory. If you remember, we were talking about smriti. In the other video, we were talking about memory, smriti. I'm not pronouncing it very well today. But Simrat and Simran comes from here, this constant repetition of the name. So through meditating and repeating of the name, happiness comes. Peace, but happiness in the terms of joy and peaceful and content. That concept of sukha. And sagale dukkha jai, and the dukkha, the suffering, goes away. And the sorrows go away. So it's a beautiful mantra we chant every morning. And Rakke Rakke Nahare, it's called Rakke is like protector, is saying, God the protector, please protect me. Saying, protector, please protect me. And so take my sorrows away and let me be in a constant remembrance of the name. That's kind of it. There is more in the chant. It's a bit long, but I'm not translating it all. Today is not for this. It's for the Yoga Sutras. But I just wanted to point out how interesting in the teachings of Guru Nanak, when he talks about dukkha and sukha, it's also very, very present. So let me go back to the original text from Patanjali. And so that's the dukkha I was referring to. Remember, we are talking about 4 kinds of symptoms of symptoms or effects caused by those 9 obstacles. And there was dukkha, the suffering, dormanasya, and that's sadness or sorrow, even depression would go in here, despair. Angam ejayatva, that's shakiness. Shakiness is like anxiety. It doesn't say there, but it's like being shaken, being anxious about something, nervous, this tremor of the limbs. Yeah, that's nervousness, so being nervous. And shvasa, that's shvasa prashvasaha, that's the inhalation and exhalation. Vikshepta is distraction. So what it means is like a disturbance, more than distraction, it's like a disturbance of the inhale and the exhale. So implying irregular breath. irregularities in the exhalation and inhalation of the breath. That's the translation that we have from Swami Ganeshwara, in the text that you have on the screen. So let's go through the 4 again. There's the suffering. There is the despair and the sadness and the sorrow, that it's linked to the dukkha. There is the nervousness and anxiety. Anxiety is linked to that. And I talked about anxiety in another video when I was saying that this stress mechanism that gets triggered, that brings a lot of energy into the blood to deal with the emergency that we are dealing with, this wild creature that is attacking us, this lion that is coming to eat us. And then we have all this energy to deal with the lion, but in reality, in our modern life, most of the time, we are not in there. We are sitting in our desk with a little computer, or we are in front of a person, and we are just experiencing extreme stress. And then all that energy that goes into the system, and because we are not running away from any wild creature, we are just staying in place. All this energy going through it is very stressful, even more. So it's this anxiety. I have to do something. I don't know what to do, right? So this anxiety and shakiness, this is what Patanjali says, the shakiness, it's linked to this. And that causes an irregular breath. So you see how the body and the mind, through the shakiness of the body, and this is all the levels, right? The body is shaking, which you experience also like anxiety, but it's a very physical thing. Emotionally, you are in despair, and you are in the sorrow. And mentally, physically, emotionally, mentally, there is the pain, the dukkha, the suffering that is like also mental suffering, not just physical, but mental suffering. And there is one thing that connects the body, the emotions, and the mind, and that's the breath. Actually, also the spirit. Body, emotions, mind, and spirit, it's all connected to the breath. So it manifests on these 3 levels, and it manifests in the breath. So I find it very interesting, very revealing that Patanjali will identify these 4 concepts, these 3 levels, and the thing that connects the 3 levels. And he's already setting us up. You will start to identify, particularly in these sutras that we are reading today, these 10 sutras we will read today, they are setting us up to be receptive for the actual practice that comes in book 2. So we know about this Ashtanga Yoga. Many people who will be watching this video already have heard of the 8 steps. So you already have heard about pranayama and all that. But he's setting the whole scene so that you understand, okay, do you get why pranayama could be important? All right, so he's telling us, look, there is obstacles to get to samadhi. There's actually, before we get to samadhi, we need calmness of the mind and mastery over our thoughts. And there is obstacles to get there. And when there is these obstacles, that's going to manifest in a number of ways. One of the ways in which it manifests that connects all of them, physical, emotional, and mental, that is the breath. Well, what about going into the breath and changing the breath? That's very powerful because since everything is connected, if you are feeling anxious and that's manifesting in your breath, disturbance in the inhalation and the exhalation, if you control your breath and make it soft and harmonious, it will be very challenging at first, but as you manage to get the breath to flow smoothly from one state to the other, that is having an effect on all the other levels, on the physical and the emotional and the mental. It is inevitable. It's an absolute consequence. You cannot stop it. I remember hearing like, you cannot breathe 4 times per minute and be angry at the same time. It's just not possible. So if you are feeling some anger rising in you, and I know a lot of people struggle with anger, that's not particularly my challenge. I have other challenges which are stronger than anger. Maybe it was a bit more when I was younger, more like passive aggression maybe, but some people struggle a lot with physical heat that rises and they find themselves difficult to control and they get very reactive, then they cause damage to other people and then that creates more karma and so on and so forth. So if that is your situation, bring the breath down to 4 times per minute, which means 15 seconds per breath. And if you control your breath to go as slow as 15 seconds, you just cannot be angry at the same time. Now, I've tried it, but again, this is not something that is particularly my challenge. I have other challenges, but I recommend anyone to try it. If you try it, please let me know. Write in the comments later on, how was the experience for you? If you find yourself in a situation that is getting you angry, you know, I could say probably any kind of emotional disturbance. But yeah, you go down the breath to 4 times per minute, or what we recommend in the yoga trainings, to actually bring it down to 1 breath per minute. But 1 breath per minute is more when you are in a meditative state. When you are walking around, when you're doing things, it's harder to breathe so slow because the body needs more energy and prana. So 4 times per minute or maybe a bit more is necessary, particularly if you are active. But in any case, regulating the breath consciously, which is what we do in the practices of pranayama, is going to have an effect on helping to calm the mind. And helping to calm the mind helps you to focus it. If you can focus, you can master it. If you can master it, you can find citta vritti nirodha, and it's easier to stay into a meditative state, and therefore samadhi comes faster. So the breath is a key component, and this is why Patanjali is telling us, look, pay attention, breath connects all these levels. That's going to be key when we go into the practices. So we will see that when we go into the second part of the book. But it's good. It's good that we start to point it out, because he is sitting, he's putting the seeds to what will come later on. All right. So that was 1.31. If you're online listening, by the way, if you're connected, feel free to drop a hello, a satnam, or ask any questions. I'm here for you. I'm doing the live streams. I'm not recording the videos. I'm doing live streams because I like the interaction with you. So if you are listening online right now and you want to make any comment, feel free to write it in the chat and it should appear on the screen. Let's go on, 1.32. So to prevent and deal with these 9 obstacles and the 4 consequences, the recommendation is to make the mind one-pointed, training it how to focus on a single principle or object. All right? So, tat pratisedha artam ekka tattva abhyasa. Abhyasa, we go back to abhyasa. If you remember a few sutras ago, we were talking about the 2 most important components when we are dealing with the mind and with our practice in general. Actually, our practice is one of them. That's the abhyasa, and the other is the vairagya. So letting go and practice. Keeping up and letting it go, which is kind of like a paradoxical, like a yin-yang kind of thing. Hold on to it, like practice and stable, and letting it go. So abhyasa and vairagya. So these 2 concepts are so critical, and we can see them. There we go. Satnam Isabel, hello, good to see you. It's good to see you here. I've been seeing your comments. I didn't reply to some of the comments yet, but I will do it soon. So there we go. We are talking about abhyasa here, the practice. And Patanjali is telling us, start to do this practice, ekka tattva, on one single tattva. Now the word here, tattva, that's kind of interesting because the first time I read it, I was like, wait, is he talking about the tattvas? Like the 5 elements, earth, water, shore, and so on. And I think he is. Partly. I think the word tattva can be understood in many ways, and it also depends on the context. So remember that we were talking about at the very beginning of the course, I was mentioning how Sanskrit has many ways to be interpreted. Some words will have different meanings in different contexts. And also these texts, particularly the Yoga Sutras, are made in such a way that you can interpret it and understand it in a number of different ways. Well, if we look at this line where he talks about one focus on a tattva, one practice on one tattva, we can think, well, what if he really meant tattva-like elements? Because normally you would find the translation more like you find it here. Tattva as truth, because it's connected to sattva. Sattva is truth. So truth or principle or subject. So it's telling you, look, practice concentrating on one thing at a time, one principle or something that is real, that is true. And so it's telling us about one pointed concentration, which is, again, setting us up for when we come into the 8 steps, and we will talk about dharana, which is the section where we are concentrating. But even before we go to dharana, there's pratyahara. And pratyahara, we will see more about it, but basically it's something in connection to the senses. And we have 5 senses, and the 5 senses are linked to the 5 tattvas, to the 5 elements. So we were just talking about pranayama, and he's setting us up for when in the next book he will talk about pratyahara. So pranayama, pratyahara, the connection between the breath and now the senses, the elements, and he's telling us focus on one thing, on one concept at a time. So and that's my feeling, and I think we will have more ideas of why am I getting that feeling as well. So let me go to 1.33, a little bit more in the center of the screen. He's going to say, okay, well, all right, let's see now what kind of mental attitude should we have in relationships. In relationships, the mind becomes purified by cultivating feelings of friendliness towards those who are happy, compassion towards those who are suffering, goodwill towards those who are virtuous, and indifference or neutrality towards those who we perceive as wicked or evil. Now, this line is, at first, it made me stop quite a bit, because as I read it, friendliness towards those who are happy, compassion towards those who suffer, joy towards those who are virtuous, indifference towards those who are wicked. Why? Why should we have different attitudes? I don't see. My first reaction is like, wait, why should we have different attitudes towards anyone? Shouldn't we at some point reach the state where you can see God in everyone, in everything, and everywhere? And if so, why feel compassion towards those who suffer, but not feel compassion towards those who are causing the suffering? Let's say somebody is doing some karmic actions that are causing suffering on another person. Let's say like a bully, yeah, and then the victim of the bully. And they say, well, be compassionate towards the victim and be indifferent towards the bully. I mean, I can see in a way why it would make sense, but wait a moment. The bully, he doesn't know better. He probably has his brain wired in a particular way, maybe by his upbringing, maybe whatever he dealt with in his life, whatever he lived through his parents. And then I thought, well, shouldn't we be compassionate for him as well, or her, whatever? And then I found one more layer behind this, and it's like, well, yes, but the bully is also suffering. So he says, be compassionate towards those who suffer, but look, the wicked ones, those who are causing something evil, in a way, inside, in their soul, there's also some suffering. So can I be compassionate towards the soul that feels crushed under the weight of the ego causing all those karmas, at the same time that I feel compassion for the one who is receiving all this punishment, unnecessary pain, and so on? And I think that's partly the answer, that in a way everybody suffers. Everybody experiences dukkha. So can we be compassionate about everyone? However, if we show compassion, if we show in our outward actions and attitude towards someone, if we show some kind of friendliness and compassion towards the one who is doing an evil act, then in a way we are feeding that monster. I'm not talking about the person, okay? I'm talking about the monster artifact or archetype that is being stuck to their psyche, and they are behaving through that field of view. So they keep behaving in that way because in some way that's how they learn to survive, or they even enjoy it. They may even have learned to enjoy it in that way. But can we be compassionate also for the soul within without outwardly expressing that to him or her? So the thing is, I remember, I think I mentioned this before. When I was little, I remember in school, very large class, like 40 kids, over 40 kids. I was in the back row, and I was a very good student, meaning I was doing what the teacher would ask me to do, and I was intelligent enough that I knew what she would be asking. So if she asked me anything, I would know the answer, and that's considered a good thing. So you are a good boy, and you sit in the back, and they don't pay any attention to you because you are quiet and you are calm and you don't do anything. And then there is the bad boys, those who were causing more disturbances. And I see now that a lot of the games they were playing, a lot of the jokes that they were throwing around was trying to capture the attention of the group. They were just trying to get attention. And that comes back to the attention deficit disorder I was mentioning before. Who knows how they were when they were little? But in that context of that class, they were throwing jokes around, laughing out loud, creating disturbances. And we were 40 kids with one teacher. So it meant that the whole class was disturbed. And the teacher had to pay a lot of attention to these kids, telling them to shut up, telling them, throwing her emotions. She would get angry and she would tell them that they are not doing it right. And all this emotion is energy in motion. On a subconscious level, those kids were getting energy and attention through that action. So that attitude from the teacher was feeding even more this attitude from those guys who were just comedians or whatever. And so that didn't help their soul, right? That paying attention to that person when they are throwing the tantrum or throwing the joke around to just be noticed, that's not going to help their soul to feel recognized. So what I understand that here Patanjali is telling us, look, upeksha, he's saying, let me bring it back. He says, upekshanam, indifference, disregard, don't pay any attention. So I can imagine, I remember when I was a child thinking, look, the more I am well behaved, the less attention I get. And all the class is looking at these guys who are just behaving in the worst possible way. So you can imagine if they would make a joke and everybody applied Patanjali's teachings and everybody was indifferent and they didn't pay any attention to the joke, the joker would soon stop because he would not get what he wanted. He wouldn't get a reaction, he wouldn't get a laugh, he wouldn't get the attention of the teacher and the screams and the emotions and all that. So the joke would be neutralized in that way. Then when they would react or behave in a normal, regular way like any other kid, then you would turn to them and listen to them and give them attention. That attention that you would give in that moment, that would be feeding that kind of behavior. So I would say that that's like the best possible way to direct a kid's behavior when they are behaving in the wrong possible way. Just ignore it. But not ignore it like pretend that it doesn't happen, but don't give energy to that. And then when they are not going into that tantrum, like kids having a tantrum, they can throw a tantrum and hopefully they manipulate you through that. And this happens, the kid is in public and the kids are learning emotions, and for the first time they are checking what happens when they do that. And then they observe you. And you are the parent, you are supposed to be the stable one. And then if you get angry because the kid is throwing a tantrum, they notice that and say, ooh, look at that. Mommy got angry or daddy got angry. Ooh, I have power over their emotions. And then they find it extremely interesting. And then they start to explore and later exploit that power. And then they will, cry when they need something. Actually, they want something to get it from you. And so, being a yogis, as we are, right? We should see through the facade, see through the lie, and then, if the kid is throwing a tantrum, don't bend down to just satisfy the tantrum, the little inner monster, let's say. I'm not saying the baby is a monster, you know what I mean. Don't just make it so that the child doesn't make any noise and it doesn't embarrass me in front of everybody. But that's the thing. If we don't do that when they are in that age, then you face young kids, adolescent guys who are in a school disturbing the whole class, for example. That would be one consequence. So my understanding is, let's go back to this point. There's Maitri, there's Karuna, Mudita, and Upeksha. Friendliness, compassion, joy, and indifference. Can we, no matter the person, I mean, we all know everybody suffers, and therefore I'm going to be compassionate for the suffering of everyone. But actually, it is out of my compassion towards the evil, the one who is doing an evil act, let's say the bully, okay? I may be compassionate about their soul and do what I feel is best for their soul, which is to totally be a blank wall and give no energy from myself to that person when they are behaving in that way. And then when they revert to a humble, more natural, true to themselves, to their inner selves attitude, I will be there engaged with them, ready to exchange energy and ready to have an interaction. So that's out of compassion that you do that. Yeah, when the bully behaves like that, that's a compassion. And also, it doesn't mean that if a bully is behaving wrong, you're not going to do anything. When Patanjali talks about indifference, it doesn't mean that you're going to ignore it and let the thing happen. We can also defend the defenseless. Yeah, but it's not about attacking the oppressor, or attacking the evil one or the monster in the evil one. It's not about that. It's about if somebody needs protection, you can be there to protect. But it's a subtle thing. I don't know if you are getting what I mean. It's a very subtle line, but we often go into fighting mode against the other rather than defending someone. So, okay, if you find somebody happy, can you be friendly towards their happiness? It's also another way to say don't be jealous because they are happy. That's like somebody's going through a good moment in their life, good things are happening, and then one part of us may feel jealousy for what they are going. Why do they receive so many gifts from life? Do they deserve them? Don't even think in that way. Just be friendly, he's telling us Patanjali. In a way, this is connected to the other video I did a few weeks ago when I was talking about, or was it last week? I think it was last week, about the law of attraction. And I talked about how a lot of the law of attraction is in connection to the kind of mentality that you have. You have a scarcity mentality, an abundance mentality, or a prosperity mentality. If you want to know more about those three things, you can watch that video. But basically, I was saying, look, if you live in a scarcity mentality, you feel there is a limited number of resources, and if somebody is getting them, you are not getting them. So if you see somebody happy because they are receiving some gifts, a part of us feels like, he's getting them, so I'm not going to get them. And therefore, you get angry and maybe resentful or maybe jealous. So Patanjali is saying, don't have that attitude. Just be friendly. If somebody is happy because they are receiving gifts in life, just enjoy it with them. Just be happy for them. That's prosperity mentality. So that's the Maitri, that's the Karuna, there's the compassion I already mentioned, and Mudita, that is the joy of the virtue. I see this Mudita more a little bit like, if you see somebody virtuous, can you be inspired by that and enjoy? Look at that. How incredible is that person? It's wonderful. It inspires me to also explore what is my virtue. Which virtues do I come into this world with? Can I explore them and expand them? So all these four things, this is the attitude that Patanjali is recommending us when we are in relationship to the outside world. Yeah, not in a couple. I'm saying in relationships. Let's go into 1.34. Now the mind is also calmed by regulating the breath, particularly attending to exhalation and the natural stilling of breath that comes from such practice. So he's telling us, exhale and hold without air. Exhale and hold without air. What does that tell us? Well, exhale and hold without air, that is the practice of letting go. If we have challenges with letting go in life, be it physical, emotional, or mental, through letting go of the breath, you can work on the letting go of the other aspects as well. Remember, two main concepts, two main aspects in the practice according to the Yoga Sutras. Vairagya, abhyasa. We were talking about practice right now, and now he comes back to Vairagya, letting go. So if you want to practice letting go, he just mentioned how relevant is the breath and how the breath is going to manifest the reactions that we have from the 9 obstacles. So the anxiety and all that is going to manifest in the breath. Well, how about you regulate the breath and particularly pay attention to the let it go. Regulating the breath would be the abhyasa, the practice. Letting go would be the vairagya, the non-attachment, practicing non-attachment. So in the very act of breathing consciously and exhaling consciously and holding with no air, we are developing our capacity to strengthen our both vairagya and abhyasa. So that's really, really critical. That's how important is the breath. I find it very, very interesting that Patanjali would explain it and explore it in this way and in this order. He's talking about it here. When we go into the second part of the book, when we go into the practice, he has already been preparing us to receive those seeds. Okay, 1.35. The inner concentration on the process of sensory experiencing, done in a way that leads towards higher, subtle sense perception. This also leads to stability and tranquility of the mind. Sensory experiences, senses. So you should immediately be able to connect this to the other 1.30, was it 3? No, 2. When he was talking about the tattva, yes? So remember, tattvas and the elements are connected to the senses. So now he's telling us the inner concentration on the process of sensory experiencing. Sorry, like this. So if you are already with the 8 steps in mind, if you're already with the Ashtanga steps in mind, you know that first comes pranayama, and then comes pratyahara, and then comes dharana. Dharana is the concentration, and we are talking about concentrating the mind. But before we can do that, there's something that is happening in the senses. So he's telling us, look, the breath is very important, that's pranayama. And then what do you do with the senses? So paying attention to the senses and being able to focusing them in a way that is more subtle. He mentions the subtlety. I don't know if you got it. Yeah, done in a way that leads towards higher subtle sense perception, a higher perception, pravriti. So, the senses tend to be focused on the outside, and they are getting attached to the outside. Remember, one of the things was craving. Yeah, that was one of the obstacles. So we are getting this craving. Rather than craving the objects that you are perceiving, is telling us, well, wait a moment. Let's pay attention to that sense. Don't get attached to it. Work it out through your pranayama, and then take that sense and bring it to something subtle and something higher. And that will be part of the elements of what will be pratyahara. Later on, he will use that word. He hasn't used this word yet, but it will come later on in the text. He will talk about pratyahara, and it will have to do with these senses and how we are tuning them to something subtler and higher in us. So we are pulling away from the outside, going within, making the senses more refined to perceive the subtle, and then what? 1.36. Or concentration on a painless inner state of lucidness and luminosity also brings stability and tranquility. So within us there is a certain light. There is a Jyotish Mati. Yeah, there is Jyoti. Jyoti is light. And it's interesting, Mati is like Mat. Mat is mother. So there is this light. I don't know if did I mention it here? Was it? Where did I? Oh no, I was teaching something else in the weekend. I was teaching about numbers and I was teaching about the light. And I mentioned how there's different kinds of light in us, like the light of the aura, the light of the arc line, so on. It doesn't matter. What I mentioned is that in Spanish we say when a mother gives birth to a baby, we say give light to a baby, dar a luz a un bebé. So when the mother gives light to a baby, so there is this inner light, and we can give light to something. Now, you can take this metaphor and say, well, we can all give birth to our own soul. The soul is like the baby in us, the most pure divine thing that we have within. Can we give birth to this light within us? To give birth to it is like bring it out. So Patanjali is telling us, look, don't get attached to the senses, bring the senses in, refine them, make them perceive more subtle, and now pay attention because inside of you there is a light, and you can bring your attention to that light. And it's also connected to the light of consciousness, isn't it? When you illumine something, it's like you pay attention to it, so you bring your awareness to that. So it's like illumination of something, consciousness of something. So he's now telling us, don't go so much with your senses out that trap your mind. Bring it in and pay attention to the light of consciousness. So he's starting to bring us towards the light. It's also like the light of the divine self, the soul. But the soul and the spirit and consciousness is very much interlinked. If it's not synonymous, it's very close to synonymous. So he's telling us, look, let's bring attention from the senses, from the mind, to the consciousness. And by the way, there is some meditations I learned when we were learning, my sister and I, and my sister is just coming on the street right now, so she's gonna say hello. Hello, Seva. Yeah, Seva Kaur, that's my sister, everyone. You can say hello to her. And we have a conversation the other day. It's on the YouTube channel. You love it, you love the light, Satnam, hello. So remember, Sevan, when we were learning Sanam Rasayan and Amritnam in the course, in the second level, we were learning about meditation on the light. And he was talking about how when we close our eyes in the darkness, even if we are in full darkness, when we close our eyes, there is a light within, there is a shininess, there is a certain brightness within. And sometimes it can be so bright that you open your eyes in the night, in the deep of the night with all the blinds closed, and it's really dark. You close the eyes and there is a lot of light. Then you open the eyes and there is darkness. Then you close the eyes and there is a lot of brightness. So that's quite interesting. And I don't know if you remember, Seva, but we would take that light, we could focus on it and direct the light towards the part of the body that was sick, and we could heal ourselves through moving that light. So I think Patanjali is kind of referring to both things. Probably this inner light, this Jyotirmati. Sorry, here it is. The Jyotishmati, but also the light of the soul, the light of consciousness. Yes, that was great to remember too. Yes, excellent. All right. So let's carry on. Let's go to 1.37. Or contemplating on having a mind that is free from desires, the mind gets stabilized and tranquil. Mind being Chittam. He's referring to Chittam. But remember, Chittam is like the field of consciousness, not just the mind. So Raga, the attachments and the desires, we were just talking about the right attitude towards the outside through the senses. So he's telling you, just calm down and stop this inner desire. Now, what's he referring to? When he talks about the desire, he's referring to ahankar. Remember that there is these levels of the mind. There is the manas that is linked to the senses. Sorry, let me bring it here 1 second. So there is the mind that is in connection to the senses outside. So he's telling us about that and how attached we get. This is the filtering that we have, the klishta, the coloring that is linked to our samskaras and our memories, our past memories. So he's telling us, clean this up, don't get too attached to the outside, and refine your senses, tune them in towards your consciousness and your inner light, if we go back to the heart. And then he's telling us, also pay attention to what you are addicted to, what you are craving, what you are desiring, because that desire comes from the likes and the dislikes, which is the very primal mechanism that it's linked to our childhood when we are learning to live in the world as babies. We like something, we dislike something. It's kind of like an evolution of, this is interesting, I want to know more about it. This may be dangerous, I maybe pull away from it. So this, how the ego was forming when we were very, very little, and the ego around itself creates these likes and these dislikes. So he's telling us, well, wait, pay attention to this and don't get attached to what you like and what you dislike, which is where, we get this definition of a yogi being the one who is above what you like and what you dislike, the one who is neutral and is beyond what we like and what we dislike, which is, again, connected to the dukh and sukh. And remember the sentence from Guru Nanak, and the pleasure is the disease and the pain is the remedy. So if we like the pleasure and we dislike the pain, wait, because the pain might be the remedy. So this is telling us, now Patanjali is telling us, well, deal with these desires attached to the senses, free from the desires which are linked to the senses. Okay, and we come to 1.38. Let's go on. Or by focusing on the nature of the stream in the dream state or the nature of the state of dreamless sleep, the mind becomes stabilized and tranquil. Now I have a little different understanding of this line, and I was reflecting upon it, and I've seen other translations which are similar to this, but I have another understanding on this. There is these words, swapana, nidra, jnana, and alambanam. Alambanam is the object of meditation. So what is going to be your object of meditation? These three. So Patanjali tells, look, the object of meditation can be swapna, nidra, jnana. Swapna, nidra, jnana. Okay, what is that? What does that mean? Well, swapna is the dream state. Nidra is the sleep, which means the unconscious. Yeah, in the dream state, we are stimulating the subconscious, swapna. Nidra is the sleep, meant the unconscious. And jnana is the wisdom that we receive in the conscious state. Look, one of the translations that it gives is awareness. So jnana is linked to the awareness. In order for us to receive the wisdom, that, by the way, like we say Gyan Mudra, or when we talk about Gyan Yoga, like bringing wisdom, is like bringing light to the darkness. Again, we connect it with the light. Well, that's the light of consciousness. Well, look at that. Patanjali telling us, well, maybe the object of concentration can be the jnana, the awareness, the subconscious, the swapna, the unconscious, the nidra. So he's basically telling us there is different levels of consciousness. As sleep, that's the deep sleep, that's the unconscious. There's the subconscious in the dreams. There's the conscious in the jnana. There's three different levels of consciousness, and you can make those the object of your meditation. Have you seen the progress? First, we were outside with our senses. Then he's telling us to detach from the object of the senses, to stop craving for them, to make the senses more subtle, tune them inside, bring them in, perceive the inner light, the light of consciousness, and also be aware that there is these levels of consciousness. So you're actually turning the consciousness towards itself. So you are becoming aware of awareness. You're turning the awareness towards itself, which is like, you remember at the very beginning of the Yoga Sutras when it says, and the Purusha comes to rest within itself. Yeah, the Purusha is the seer, the consciousness, the spirit. that consciousness turns back to rest in the inner nature of the self. And the inner nature is consciousness. So it's like becoming conscious of consciousness. So this whole journey of these last 10 sutras has been to calm the mind. This, if you bring this attention in this way, bring it back from the senses, from the object, bring it back and bringing back to the light of your consciousness and your consciousness itself. So becoming consciously conscious. That's what he's pointing to. That's my understanding. And we go to 1.39. We are almost finishing here. Or by contemplating or concentrating on whatever object or principle one may like, or towards which one has a predisposition, the mind becomes stable and tranquil. So this is very funny. I find it hilarious because basically he's saying, okay, do this and do that, and then do this and then do that and then do that. And at the end he says, or just focus on something you like. It's like saying, oh, just contemplate whatever object, just bring your awareness to any object, abhimata, anything of your choice, anything that you like. I mean, of course, it's not going to be anything that you like, right? It's not going to be focusing on a pile of money or on getting my fix of chocolate, right? But he's recognizing something. He's recognizing that the practice can be as diverse as humans are in the planet and have been and will be. Everybody will find their own path. And it may be that my path does not fully adapt to the way that Patanjali is describing it. So he leaves a little clause. It's like saying, make breaking the plan part of your plan. Like step 1, step 2, step 3, step 19, break all the other steps. He's kind of saying, well, in case nothing else works, what works for you? And maybe the object of your meditation is going to be a yatra instead of your breath, or a mantra, or the image of your guru, and you are doing tratakam, or it's going to be meditating on one fundamental elemental virtue like truth or peace or something like that, or compassion. Maybe your whole practice is compassion, or seva, karma yoga, yeah? Maybe that's your practice. And he says, look, if it's elevating, if it's something that is going to bring you light and awareness and consciousness, and you're going to be awake, and you're not going to be craving for more things out there, whatever objects is elevating in that way, then go and stabilize yourself into that and uplift your mind through that object. So it's kind of like a final element type of deal. I find it hilarious, that little step. Sorry, here it is. And then 1.40. In this text, this is a new section, but I will read only the 1.40 because after 1.40 is a bit different. So 1.40 is like the conclusion, and it says, look, what were we just talking about? We talked about 9 objects of obstacles, 4 consequences and symptoms of those obstacles, and then what can we do to get over these obstacles? And this whole path that he has been already seeding the ideas of pranayama, pratyahara, and dharana, also dhyana and samadhi, of course. So here comes to the 1.40. He says, well, if you go through those such practices, the ones that we described from 133 to 139, the mind develops the power of becoming stable on the smallest size object as well as one on the largest, and the mind truly comes under control. Actually, I love this word. Vashikara is mastery. More than control is mastery. Not try to control the mind, but to master your mind. So he's telling, look, if you've gone through all this, you've gone through all these steps, and you did it, and you are capable now of concentrating your mind on whatever you desire, being one atom or the whole universe, one concept like peace, or just your breath, fully attention, full concentration on your breath. If you get there, that's mind mastery. That's the mastery of your mind. And when you get to your mastery of your mind, that is the triggering for all these states of samadhi that are going to come. So that is the 1.40. And actually, I'm going to leave for the next video the following ones, which will be 1.41 to the end of this section of the book. And I'm going to leave it because that is he's going to go into much more detail again into samadhis, and he's going to make some differentiations and some clarifications of other different states of samadhi. And so, because we already talked about that in another video, I think it makes sense to separate it from this one. So in the next video, we will be exploring that. Again, we will revisit the concept of samadhi, finding clarity between different states of samadhi. And then after that comes the practice, which I'm looking forward to. Yeah, that will be the book 2 or part 2 of this book. And we will start going deep into the practice that Patanjali is suggesting. But yeah, really, really interesting 10 sutras that we covered today. Very, very, there's a lot of stuff in them. I hope that you got something out of that. And I hope it can nourish your practice as well. Remember, abhyasa and vairagya, practice, yeah? Keep it, hold it. And vairagya, let it go, let everything go, let everything go. Well, I let you go now, but thank you for being here with me. Thank you for supporting. Thank you for subscribing. Thank you to the members as well. Don't forget to drop a like, a comment, and say how it was for you. And in any case, that's all for me. Satnam. Until next time. Thank you.